Hello YouTube, and welcome to my channel and to my devlog series on a new game I'm creating called the Adventure Guild. I've decided to start creating weekly videos to document the game's progress. It should be pretty fun for anybody interested in trying out the game when it releases, as well as a cool-ish learning experience for anybody who likes indie game development. You'll be able to see the horrible mistakes that I make and at least avoid those and make your own horrible mistakes when you try making a game. I'm definitely not an expert, at least not at the making games part. The big development mistakes, I think I can make a case, but I have been creating almost completed games for a couple of years now, and I would like to help out any other game developers beginning their journey. With that being said, I won't be going super in-depth into the coding or specifics behind the scenes in these videos, so for anybody here just kind of along for the ride because you happen to randomly stumble upon a channel with 0 subscribers, please don't click away yet. I promise there'll be a minimal amount of giant coding segments. But if any of you do ever see a feature demoed in a video that you want to know how to recreate yourself, just leave a comment and I'll be sure to copy and paste whatever crazy, impossible to follow code that I used to get it to work. Another thing, there probably won't be a lot of actual recorded working footage in these videos. I know that a lot of these devlogs on YouTube like to have a cool, candid, working time-lapse scene where you feel all warm and cozy and motivated to accomplish something with your life, but honestly that's just too distracting for me when I'm actually trying to work, and if you guys could see what my real workflow looks like, you would probably be much more shocked and demotivated than inspired to follow in my footsteps. So for now, I'll just stick to gameplay and demos and save the working time lapses for the other creators. And finally, with all of that fantastic sales pitch out of the way, let's take the remaining 10% of our initial viewers and dive into the first episode of what you guys persevered through that for, some game development. Well, actually just one more boring slideshow looking page. Let's quickly run through an overview of what the Adventure Guild is going to be about, what gameplay will hopefully be like, etc., etc. So the game is going to be single-player, real-time management strategy with some turn-based combat elements added in for a little extra fun. As the player, you're going to get to grow and develop a brand new guild of adventurers, taking on lots of different contracts to gain loot, gold, and prestige. So you'll get to sign on new adventurers to join your guild, hopefully keep them alive long enough to level them up and invest some resources into them, while also balancing different guild needs and expenses, so that ultimately you can progress your guild from a tiny rank 1 guild you start out as to a mighty rank 10 guild protecting the kingdom from any and all threats. As you juggle different adventuring contracts, you'll also need to keep the various vendors and merchants around the kingdom happy to get the best prices and bonuses from them. That's not to mention some of the friendly rivalry that you may develop between your guild and some of the other NPC guilds in the kingdom. But your primary objective will be reaching guild rank 10 and getting crowned the kingdom's official adventuring guild. But you'll only be able to increase your guild rank through gaining prestige and completing some different unique contracts. There are still a ton of systems left to plan out, but for now that pretty much has the basics covered. If you're still struggling to follow my grand master plan, imagine a weird combination of a classic sports game where you develop young players into stars, mixed with some old school turn-based combat, all wrapped up in a nice shopkeeper management simulation. Basically the perfect combination of all your favorite games. Alright, finally we have some actual screen capture action for anybody still out there. Now let's quickly run through the tools I'll be using to create the game. Starting out with a pretty simple set of software that's really common among indie developers. I'll be using Unity for the actual game development, with C# and Visual Studio for the scripting in Unity, and with Aseprite for the game's top-notch pixel artwork. So here we're starting out in Aseprite, because even though I may be the worst pixel artist of all time, I still like to start out any of my game dev projects by making some of the placeholder artwork that will be used to create our initial mechanics. Just kind of helps me visualize things on the screen, and you always want to test your code when you're writing it so that you don't end up spending hours and then it doesn't actually work in the end. Anyway, so first I started out nice and ambitious with this title screen. Hopefully I'll be able to upgrade it at some point, maybe add some basic animations down the road, but for now it should get the job done. Then I went ahead and made a giant blank map of the kingdom, Since I'm going to have the player at about a 45-degree angle to the camera, kind of like some old school Pokemon-esque games, I attempted to draw a giant map here that I could put buildings on and the player on. So we've got some different roads here that'll branch out, and as the actual gameplay functions, you'll be zoomed much further in, but the camera will scroll along with the player as you move around. So it'll be kind of zoomed in, and the player will move along like this, la 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 la, and enter different buildings and such. Speaking of buildings, here's a lovely placeholder building that I made for the player entering and exiting when I'm building up those mechanics. Really hope the final version looks better than this, but you have to start somewhere. Then to wrap up the initial set of art placeholders, I made a little player sprite here with him facing different directions, like this, just to keep a little bit of perspective, even with these super rough sketches. Hopefully everybody can see that he is in theory rotating around in a circle here, so that when he's walking different directions, we'll be able to tell which way he's supposed to be facing. Now let's jump into Unity and start bringing some things to life. I booted up a brand new project from scratch and installed a few packages to get started. I know I'll be using a simple Aseprite sprite importer to pull in my art, Odin Inspector because I like to keep all of my things somewhat organized, and the tried and true Cinemachine package for moving my camera around. Then I spun up 3 different scenes here, which if I pull them up in the menu, you can see. Starting out with this main menu scene, it doesn't have any functionality yet, but we've got our title screen, and soon it will have functional buttons to take the player into the main game scene, which will generally be this one, this kingdom scene here, which has the kingdom landscape for the player. So if we zoom in a good bit here, we'll be able to see our building tossed in here as well as the player. And now that we have all of those building blocks in place, I got to work making the basic movement and interaction mechanics using Unity's input system, which is pretty straightforward and easy to use once you have a little bit of practice with it, so not too much of a problem there. Now for testing purposes, if we hit play, you can see that we can move the player around, although it is a little bit jittery. I feel like if I played this for too long, I'd either get a migraine or go completely blind, but we'll resolve that later. I added some colliders to the walls here, so the player can't actually walk off of the screen, which is nice. And we will probably limit the camera so that we don't see out into this kind of unscreened blue area at some point, or black that out. Something that the camera doesn't show this unplanned part of the map. The other feature I built out is a pretty simple interact script. As we can see, if we walk up to the door, yes, this is supposed to represent a door. It'll get better, I promise. We can walk up and this prompt will pop up that gives us a quick tip on how to enter the building. And then if we hit E, we will be teleported into the guild scene here, which ostensibly I'll build out the nice interior to the guild, and the player will pop in and we will be able to move around in here and interact with the different people, objects, etc. inside of our guild. And that interaction mechanic should work for more than just buildings too, since I built it out using an interface called iInteractable, which if I go to my scripts, you'll see I have, and I should be able to add this to NPCs, objects, and other buildings. Right now it's really simple. It just has one function that we can override in different managers to make sure that we can see it whenever we're looking for it in our colliders. I want the player to be able to interact pretty extensively with the world here, since the kingdom landscape is the main portion of the game that they're going to be able to explore. So I think it's important to have a lot of cool things built out for them to walk around in between all of the management action. So that completes all the progress that I made this week building out the game systems, but next week's plan will include adding a lot more features, including some more buildings to flesh out the entire kingdom landscape. I feel like even if they aren't populated scenes inside the buildings yet, I want to start building out the framework of what the gameplay is going to look like in the kingdom, so having more placeholder buildings will still be helpful. I also want to build out the core of the guild and contract completion mechanics, so you guys should get your first peek at how adventurers will work. I'm thinking there'll be some kind of bar or tavern that the player can visit to recruit new adventurers from. You'll walk in and see their level, stats, salary requirements, etc., and then decide if you want to recruit them to the guild, which should be really cool seeing that initial development part of your guild's journey kind of come to life. And if I have any extra time, I may begin building out the beginnings of the real-time contract completion system. I think my current idea is to have teams of adventurers head out together on contracts that you decide are worth pursuing. Then you'll kind of be able to track the completion with maybe little time bubbles running down the right-hand side of the screen. And once these time bubbles fill up, they will turn a different color and give you an amount of time to click on them and go do the combat. Because I think the majority of the contract will be traveling to and from the location, and then once they get there, you will hop in, do some combat with your adventurers, and then leave, and they will return using another time mechanic. Maybe I'll use something like green for that. So you'll have these different contracts in place at a time that you'll be able to track as you're moving around the kingdom. All jokes aside, I do really appreciate anybody who stuck around to the end of the video. Please leave any feedback about the game ideas, as well as my early attempts to do some video editing down in the comments below, and feel free to subscribe if you're interested and follow along with the Adventure Guild's journey. I'll see you next week.